Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fishkeeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the best beginner aquarium fish. So I've come up with a list of 7 fish which I think are definitely a great option for any beginner in the aquarium hobby. All of these guys on this list are super easy to care for and raise, and they require little to no extensive work. But yeah, without any further ado, let's jump straight into today's video. So, in no particular order, the first fish on our list are Bristlenose Catfish. So, Bristlenose Catfish or Bristlenose plecos are a super common catfish species that a lot of beginners actually get. So, a lot of people starting out in the aquarium hobby actually get these guys because they eat a lot of the algae off your glass and they're super helpful in your aquarium. Although a lot of people don't actually realize how big these guys can get, and they generally put them in a small tank, which is fine while they're small until they grow, obviously. But if you do have a correct size aquarium, these guys would be a perfect addition. So they technically do need a heater in their aquarium, although I've seen many cases where they do fine without a heater. So the only thing with these guys is if you want to keep them in a community tank with a couple of other fish, you will need a separate food just for them, just because these guys like the algae wafers and really herbivorous diet. And as well as this, there are a few different types of plecos out there known as xylophores, which eat a lot of wood matter. So if you end up going for a different sort of pleco that is actually a xylophore, you will need a piece of wood in their aquarium. Although besides that, they are a super simple fish to take care of, and as for water conditions, they just want pretty stable sort of tropical water conditions, nothing too extreme, and it's just pretty easy to maintain in my opinion. So these guys can actually live with quite a variety of different fish. So they can live with things from American cichlids to tetras, gouramis, guppies, all sorts of different species of fish. As long as they're not going to be beaten up too much, they should do perfectly fine in your aquarium. And in saying that, they are pretty hardy fish, so they can do with a little bit of nipping here and there. It's just you don't want them being beaten up constantly by other bigger, more aggressive fish. So these guys are a super unique and interesting looking catfish, and they're also super easy to take care of. So for those reasons, I would definitely recommend them to any beginner. Moving on to our next fish on the list, we're keeping with our catfish theme and we're going to go with Corydoras Catfish. So there is a wide variety of different cories out there, although the most common for beginners being the albino Corydoras, peppered Corydoras, and bronze Corydoras. So these guys are usually the most common for beginners just because how easy they are to keep and their price range. So obviously being a vast variety of cories out there, there will also be a vast variety of prices, and the albino bronze and peppered cories generally stay around that $5 to $10 range. Although as you go up into the more rare and unique looking cories, you will start getting more expensive. But they are an awesome fish for a smaller sized aquarium, and they can live with quite a few different tank mates. Generally, as long as there's plenty of space for these to hide in, they will do fine with quite a few different fish. Another thing with these guys is they do prefer to be on a soft substrate or a bare bottom tank, just because sometimes more coarse and rough substrate can cut their barbels, which are their whiskers that they use to sense and feel out stuff around the aquarium. But yeah, besides that, these guys are great little fish. They are also super interesting, and my particular favorite out of the 3 is definitely the albino Corydoras. I've had them for a long time, and I think they're super unique looking and also really nice looking. Especially if you get a group of around 6 to 8 of these guys, you will see some really unique behaviors, and yeah, they're just a super awesome fish. So these guys, like the Bristlenose, do technically need a heater, but once again, I have seen many people keep them quite well without heaters. It's just you'll find the most activity and the healthiest cories generally live in tanks with a heater. So the difference between these guys and the Bristlenose Catfish is that these guys generally don't actually eat the algae off the glass of your aquarium, although they do scavenge around the bottom of your aquarium looking for leftover food and little bits of broken down debris, and that's generally what they feed on. They also like pretty similar water conditions to the Bristlenose, so just anything really stable tropical water conditions will be perfect for them. But yeah, besides that, I think they are definitely an awesome, unique addition for any beginner. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a super awesome looking fish. We have Madaka. So Madaka are generally kept as an outdoor pond sort of fish, although they do great indoors in small tanks. So a great thing about these guys is that where they come from, they live in generally very cold conditions, so they don't actually need a heater in their aquarium, which is super convenient and useful for any beginner. But besides that, you can get an array of different colors of these guys, and they're becoming more and more popular here in Australia. So these guys are actually a top water fish, meaning that they generally stick to the top of your aquarium. So it's always good if you're keeping these guys if you throw in any sort of lilies or floating plants, just to give them some structure to hide in if they ever need to get away from any bigger or more aggressive fish. So that brings me on to my next point, tank mates. So since these guys generally spend most of their time at the top of your aquarium, you don't want anything too aggressive that's going to come up underneath them and nip at them or their bottom fins. This will just stress them out a lot, and considering they're at the top of your aquarium already, it just raises the risk that they may actually jump out of your aquarium. So I wouldn't keep them with anything that's too fast moving, like Denios that might nip at them every now and then, or obviously any bigger, more aggressive cichlids, or just any more aggressive fish in general. Water conditions for these guys are, again, any stable tropical water conditions, although they are very hardy and can deal with small fluctuations in the water conditions, which is super useful for any beginner, just because every now and then you may mess up with a water change or something, but that shouldn't affect these guys too much at all. So because of all these reasons, a great option for any beginner for an aquarium is definitely Madaka. Moving on to our next fish on the list, we have a super popular fish nowadays. We have gouramis. So I'm talking about dwarf gouramis in particular here. So anything like the flame gouramis or coral blue gouramis are generally what I would recommend for any beginner. So the main reason I would recommend these guys is because they are obviously, one, super easy to keep, and two, they are just super bright colored and really attractive for any beginner aquarium keeper. So the flame and coral gouramis generally need a heater in their aquarium, although if you're going for a gourami such as a paradise fish, they can actually be kept without a heater in their aquarium and they can withstand quite cold conditions. The only thing about the paradise fish is that they do get a little bit bigger than the dwarf gouramis, and in my opinion, they're not as colorful and nice to look at as the dwarf gouramis are. So once again, stable tropical water conditions are great for these guys, and as for tank mates, they can go with pretty much any sort of tropical small fish. Gouramis can be quite aggressive themselves, so I would definitely not recommend putting them with other types of gouramis or cichlids, but small catfish, loaches, tetras, guppies, those sorts of things are perfectly fine with these guys. So these guys will color up a lot more if you do keep them in a planted aquarium, just because this makes them feel a lot safer. So most of the time they will exhibit those more impressive colors. Another thing that you can do to help these guys keep that nice coloration is feed them a really good quality high protein diet. So you can get color enhancers for fish like this, although I would just recommend using a really good quality food, and most of the time you will find that they do keep that really nice coloration. With that being said, another great option for any beginner is definitely gouramis. Moving on to the next fish on our list. This technically isn't actually a fish, although I'm just going to say it is anyway. We have cherry shrimp. So there is a large array of different colors of cherry shrimp, although my personal favorites are the yellow and blue cherry shrimp. The red cherry shrimp I just find a little bit more basic than these two, although they do still make a great beginner fish. So cherry shrimp are super unique and they look awesome in a planted aquarium, so they can cohabitate quite well with a large array of different nano species, although any sort of fish big enough to fit the cherry shrimp in their mouth are obviously going to be not a very good tank mate. Although I would recommend things like enlis or small tetras, just anything that's not really going to nip at them and break off legs or even eat them. So cherry shrimp do well without a heater in their aquarium, which is once again super useful for any beginner keeper. The only thing that beginners may find hard about cherry shrimp is that they do not like small fluctuations in their water parameters. So this is why most of the time you will see people drip acclimate their shrimp when they first get them, just to slowly introduce the shrimp into the new water conditions so they don't get too stressed out due to the drastic change. So a great thing to put in these guys' tank is any source of calcium. So dried coral or even cuttlebone is great. This just helps with their molting process, and it just helps them get a nice strong exoskeleton. Besides that, they don't need any crazy filtration or lighting, and they just eat pretty simple foods. So that is why these are another great option for any beginner. Moving on to our next fish on our list, we have a really unique looking fish. We have swordtails. So swordtails are a live bearer, meaning they give birth to live young, so they are not only a super easy fish to keep, but they are super easy to breed as well. So these guys can live perfectly fine without a heater in their aquarium. They can do well indoors or outdoors in a small pond. And a great thing about these guys is that you can get so many different colors, and they are super bright and super attractive for any beginner. These guys can go with a lot of different tank mates. As long as nothing's gonna nip at their big long tail, you should find no troubles at all. And these guys are a super duper hardy fish. They can withstand a lot of different water parameters, and they don't mind small to medium sort of fluctuations in the water. Again, for these guys though, they do prefer stable tropical water conditions. So a lot of people don't keep these in planted aquariums, although I find their color pops a lot more if you do, and they just look a lot healthier if you keep them with plants and substrate. But besides that, they are a super simple fish to keep, and they're definitely another great option for any beginner. Then moving on to our last fish on our list, I think a lot of people could have predicted this one. It is definitely the most common fish in the aquarium hobby. We have guppies. So guppies are again a live bearer. They are super easy to breed and keep, and they require little to no effort whatsoever. They come in thousands and thousands of different colors and fin shapes, and they are super awesome and unique fish. Again, like the swordtails, they can be kept indoors or outdoors. They don't need a heater whatsoever, and as long as you have pretty stable tropical water conditions, they should breed and thrive for you very well. So if you want to try and breed these guys, I would definitely recommend putting them in a planted aquarium, and I would actually recommend putting them in a planted aquarium regardless, just because their colors pop more and you won't find their fins get cut up on fake artificial plants if you keep them with real plants. And the reason you're going to want to keep them with real plants if you are breeding them is to give the baby somewhere to hide when they're first born, because a lot of the time, if they can, the parents will actually try and eat the fry. Besides that, if you plan to keep them outside, I would recommend having some sort of mesh screen over the top of your pond, just to stop any birds from coming down and eating them. I would also recommend having a lid on their aquarium, just because sometimes they can jump out. Although it's very uncommon to happen, they can if they get spooked, and being such a small fish, they are super agile and can jump out of really tiny gaps. So just keep a lid on them in whatever setup you have them in. Besides that, they are super simple to feed. You can get pretty much any sort of food for them. They will eat pretty much whatever, although I would definitely recommend trying to feed them live foods like live baby brine shrimp, just because this gets them really nice and healthy and ready to breed, and also keeps their colors nice and bright for you. But yeah, with that being said, they are definitely one of the best, and in my opinion, probably the best beginner fish out there. But with that being said, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a nice, easy aquarium fish. If you haven't already, please make sure to go down and subscribe and comment your thoughts on the video. I always love reading all the comments from you guys. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to go check out my other videos. But yeah, with that being said, I'll see you all in that next video.